Hello and welcome to the Nintendo Network, and I really hate how Pokemon still does two versions. I'm not speaking about the sequels or remakes. Black and White and Black and White 2 are awesome and something I would love to see more, honestly. But I mean how they release Sword and Shield, Sun and Moon, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, and so forth. I'm just over it, honestly. It doesn't really bring anything to the games anymore. But a long time ago, I see why and how it started. The idea came from executive producer Satoshi Tajiri and his childhood when he would collect insects. Along with seeing the new Game Boy link cable and reportedly thinking about an insect crawling along it from one end to the other, the basic idea of Pokemon was formed. Very basic. Satoshi wanted trading to be integral to the game's design, and what better way to encourage that than to have Pokemon exclusive to certain versions of the games, right? You have Pokemon Blue but really want a Magmar, which is exclusive to Red. Well, you better hope you know someone with Red so you can trade for it. And catch an extra of something like Electabuzz to make it worthy of the trade. A Psyduck and a Master Ball will not do, and yes, I knew a kid who did that. Add in battling to make the link cable have multiple purposes, and it really was a great idea, and it blew up. They took the idea of version exclusive even further with Gold and Silver and beyond, giving each game a legendary Pokemon of its very own. And it worked out great. Back then. Pokemon was released in the late 90s. It is now 2020, and even 4 generations ago with Diamond and Pearl, the idea of 2 versions was rather stale. At least with Ruby and Sapphire, there was an attempt to make each game different with each having their own evil team. But the basic story was still the same, and the teams were basically color swapped from each other and were pretty much interchangeable. Plus, Emerald proved you could have one game doing everything, making it pointless. Okay, not pointless, it was effort in the right direction, and I do commend Game Freak for doing it. For the past few generations, it has felt like the 2 versions at release was just because it was always done that way, and while trading was very important. Yeah, trading is important, but became a bit less vital to have version exclusive with the introduction of the GTS and the online trading in general. Plus, the rise of the internet made obtaining your missing Pokemon easier, thus completing your Pokédex something that was not as hard as it once was. So why do I keep bringing it up? I have a few theories, and I think I can object to all of them to help me argue of why Generation 9 needs only one version. The first is, it's tradition. Every new generation has had 2 versions, so they have to keep that tradition alive. Let's get this out of the way. Just because something has always been done a certain way, it is not healthy to think it always has to be done that way. This applies to many things in life, and the version debate is no exception. Even in the realm of Pokemon, always doing things the same way has not been their MO. 5th generation, instead of having an advanced version of the games, got sequels. Generation 6 didn't even have a 3rd version to speak of, which is still a bit of a head scratcher, as Pokemon Z was pretty much just there, and I need to jump off that ramp before it takes over this entire video. We'll pocket that for another day. And Generation 7 basically put Ultra in front of the names of a game that was literally a year old, and I still have issues with that generation, so let's not get into that. So just because they always have doesn't mean they always will. Look at the national deck situation, and God, I probably shouldn't be bringing this up. But it's not the first time something similar, albeit on a smaller scale, happened. When going into Generation 3, they dropped the gotta catch 'em all because the Game Boy Advance wasn't going to connect to older systems and games. Thus, the remakes were born with Fire Red and Leaf Green to bring in older Pokemon for the Game Boy Advance games. On that topic, it seemed like every new generation would bring a remake, from Fire Red to Leaf Green to Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and then Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. But the last remake in these veins, Let's Go was different, was in 2014. Since then, people have been predicting Diamond and Pearl remakes for years, saying Game Freak had to make them. But tradition is not a factor. The remakes were originally produced for a certain reason, to get access to older Pokemon, and it's sort of outlived that. Not saying that Shiny Diamond and Sparkly Pearl wouldn't be welcome, just hammering my point in. Secondly, trading would die off because of one version. No, it would not. Especially with concepts like the Wild Area and Sword and Shield, where different weather and conditions affect what Pokemon appear. Meaning I can run into a Lucario on a day my friend was unlucky enough to meet him, or couldn't play for one reason or another. I can then breed and help him with a Riolu instead of him tirelessly checking all the time every day. But as fun as the wild area is, they could make it more dynamic to have different weather for different people. Or even have it connect to a weather app so the weather is real time. And when you're offline, it has a set pattern to change or something. This could mean that even when my friend Matt is experiencing cloudy weather, maybe it's raining for me who lives south of him. This gives different people different chances to collect different Pokemon. Look, the foundation of what the original trading was died with the GTS and online, hands down. It is easier, quicker, simpler to complete each region's Pokédex, defeating the challenge almost. The biggest challenge is getting the opposing box art legendaries, and even that's not too hard. Most people have at least one friend who have got the opposite version and then just trade back and forth to complete the decks. I feel like I'm giving trading some hate, and I sorta am, but I feel like the idea itself needs revamped to make it something worthwhile again from like it was all those years ago. And having two versions does not fix that issue. And finally, it's a money game. Show of hands, how many of you bought both versions of every mainline game? Probably quite a few of you. I remember I bought both gold and silver. No judgment, but Game Freak and Nintendo knows that people do this. They know people will buy both and play both, even if it is just to complete the decks. And it's a side of the company I hate the most. But every, and I do mean every company out there, does something in a similar vein. You see, both versions are on the charts of the highest sold games of the year, but if it is just one, it'd still be there, but I doubt it would have the same numbers. It was said that the games combined sold 6 million copies so far. Let's say the breakdown was 3.5 million Sword and 2.5 million Shield. I don't think the total would be 6 million still if it was just Pokemon Galar version. Stupid name, I know, but it gets the idea across. Even if it ended up being 5 million Galar versions sold instead, at $60 a pop, that is... carry to 3, do some random fake math, why I do this here, and that is... $60 million. Let that sink in. Yes, rough numbers, quick round calculations, but there it is. I think this is probably one of the driving forces that keeps two versions coming. Why we saw that the last two generations that had enhanced versions had two of them instead of the traditional one that we've seen through generations 1 through 4. And yes, putting the numbers in front of me, well, honestly made me think, yeah, a single version isn't going to happen anytime soon. That is a ton of money for minimal effort. Yes, each game has some differences, but it wasn't like they're making two different games. It's that old meme, can I copy your homework? Okay, but make it look original. Man, I made myself a little bit depressed with that. Because honestly, I want Pokemon to innovate a bit more. I adore the wild areas, and putting aside the internet issues, I think it is wonderful and I hope they expand upon it. Imagine even though it wasn't a ton of time, but the time they put into making two versions could be spent working on just one version of the game, fixing things like online, polishing the game a bit more, and so forth. I mean, they could fix the worst part of the game, the tree! Seriously, people, it was a bloody tree. Yes, it looks bad, but to not buy a game you would enjoy is just plain asinine. Sorry, getting back to point. Not that I agree with everything, but the backlash to many different aspects of Sword and Shield, mostly pre-launch before people got their hands on it, should be a bit of a wake-up call for Game Freak. They did some new things, the wild area, no real evil team, kaiju battles. But in this era of the Switch, when Breath of the Wild is unlike any Zelda from before, and Odyssey gave us a lot more freedom than past Marios, and the risks they took paid off big time, and the third and the big three of Nintendo had all of our eyes on it to see what they could do to reinvent the Pokemon formula. Condensing it down to one version instead of two could have been a step in the right direction. And maybe one day we'll see that. With Generation 9, hopefully we don't have to wait till Generation 10. But I want to leave you with one last thought and question. For years, people say Crystal, Emerald, and Platinum are the way to play the games of those generations, and prefer to the first games of the generation. Don't we deserve to have that kind of quality out of the gate for each new generation? Thank you for joining me here at the Nintendo Network. What are your thoughts on having two versions at the start of every new generation of Pokemon? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, join me on my Discord, and consider helping me out on Patreon. As always, this is the Nintendo Network, signing off.